Hello and welcome to another amazing episode of Decrypting Relationships with Tolu Olafalashe and
Olu Benson.
Olu Benson. How are you today?
Very good, thank you. And yourself?
Fantastic. I'm well. Before we go straight into it, let us do our customary what's that thing called?
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
You know how you mean on Tolu, aren't you?
So let's go.
You go this time.
Okay. You just flow so naturally when you say it. Anyway,
Well,
so
maybe you should start
guys,
testing yourself too.
exactly. So guys, ladies, gentlemen, everyone listening to us, we just want to make it very clear that we are not certified advisors of anything of in any way. But what we do is we come with a lot of passion.
Yes.
Olu has over 25 years. I have about 20 years of marriage experience in our respective marriages, and we really felt pulled and led to share our experiences, and somehow trusting and believing that it will touch and bless somebody listening out there. So
Yes.
everything we say is from our experience, and so please weigh up what you hear, and if you're a prayerful person, wait up with prayers. How did I do?
You did great, man. For your first time, if
Thank
I
you very
may.
much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Practice makes perfect, they say, remember?
Exactly. You dropped me in it though, but I had to swim or sink. Anyway,
Well,
so the last time we had our last discussion was really about supporting. When we're essentially talking to people who are exploring going into um, being exclusive, as whatever they call it these days, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, whatever, right? But just while we're making that decision into going into that next phase, there's certain things that we need to bring to the table, isn't it? So supporting one
yes.
another's aspirations, supporting one another's dreams, not in word alone, but also in action, is where we left it.
And believing in each other.
Believing in each other, so it's an opportunity to begin. And I think it's foundational. It's almost like trying to build a house, and then so basically we're looking at what to lay as foundation, isn't it? Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so today, we were just really looking at, okay, where do we go from there? So we've talked about a lot of things. Supporting one another is a very, very key one. And I think today, it'll be interesting to perhaps share some of our thoughts as well on certain ways that going forward, maybe, obviously in marriage, there are ways that things happen that you can then begin to say, oh, I didn't really feel supported in there, Are there some examples that we can share now for people to be aware before they actually begin their own journey, of being engaged and getting into marriage? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So let's hear it.
Okay,
Get the ball rolling.
Get the ball rolling. So I think, before we started recording, we're talking about the roles of the male and the role of the female, didn't we?
Kind of. Not really. I wouldn't say roles.
Well, you talked about someone who, say hypothetically, the lady has a baby, and sometimes the male feels, well, you know what, as long as I provide the livelihood for the family, I don't have a lot of responsibility changing nappies or carrying the baby when the baby is sleeping or the baby is crying and she's in the kitchen and he's in the living room watching TV and he's shouting, hello, can you come from the kitchen and attend to the baby? You know what I mean?
I think in all fairness, that comes under cultural bias.
Well,
and
this is why
education, roles. Those are not the ideal roles, which is why I objected to saying roles, because I don't agree with that scenario. Hence my saying they're biases that are not healthy.
but the reality is people see them as rules, and that's why when we have these discussions, we want to debunk, right,
Yeah.
those norms, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's why I use that language of roles, because
Okay.
if you speak to people, people will say, "Yo, well, I have my role and she has her roles," and of course,
Mm,
it's like you said, the cultural norms,
mm.
not what it should be
Not
in
the
terms of
ideals.
supporting. Yeah, not the ideas, because when you support one another, it's about, oh, the baby's crying, she's in the kitchen, I need to help her, and besides, that's my
Exactly.
baby. You understand? So, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why, yeah.
So yeah, so
Hmm.
speaking to that, I
Hmm.
think so the idea will be for us to, based on our individual experiences, to kind of share some of the scenarios and um how we went into our relationships, because it wasn't like those biases weren't there,
Mm.
but we had to work from a place of knowledge to kind of work through those biases to then find our own comfort area where whatever it was we did as young couples,
Hmm.
uh, as a young couple, kind of worked for us. So we had to find our own norm.
Yeah.
And that is really what this, hopefully, this session will be about, that each couple has to find their own norm, irrespective of what your biases or your background says. And
Yes.
but at the
Yes.
end of the day, it's a journey. Like we said, marriage is a journey, and this is this discovery phase is really the start of that journey, for you to understand a lot of things about each other, to realize that it's a partnership.
Absolutely.
It is
And
not about one person having their way
absolutely.
all the time, or one person looking good all the time, or one person just doing whatever works with just them. It is
Let
a
me share.
partnership.
Let me share a quick story.
Sure.
While it's still fresh in my head, that's why I had to interrupt you. I do apologize. I really do
No
hate
worries.
interrupting. Um, there's a story. When we're talking about discovery phases now, we mustn't forget that sometimes, I think we discussed this some time ago, maybe in a previous conversation, that the discovery stage could actually be marriage sometimes, because some people do not have the opportunity to have prolonged
Yeah.
courtship. And so some of this discovery will happen in marriage sometimes,
Yeah.
anyway, this is the story. I had a friend, and and he's happy for me to share this, because
Okay.
we've had this discussion already with him. And he married this very lovely lady, but
Mm.
is the typical traditional guy, like we were saying
Okay.
earlier on, how he had been shaped by tradition. You're laughing already. He's a typical traditional
Oh
chap.
boy.
So he's
Okay.
married typical traditional West African, and let me not mention any
Oh
country in
dear. Now
particular. West African,
you're taking it home.
you know,
Okay.
and
I'm
and
listening.
she was born in the UK, grew up in the
Oh.
UK. Mom and dad are very much UK centric.
Okay.
Dad helps out in the kitchen.
They're westernized.
Yes, yes. Dad would iron, for the
Oh.
kids. It would, and all that kind of stuff. And that's what she grew up knowing. Now he grew up obviously in West Africa, and there's certain things that, yeah. Anyway, so he got married. They had a kid. And I was saying to him, I said, "Oh wow, I'm really excited, because like I said, I've always loved kids and always loved
Hmm.
having a family. I hadn't married and I didn't have any kids at the time. So I said, please make sure you help out with your, with raising the baby. Help her.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was there one time and the baby needed help or something, and he said no, leave her. The baby, and he was like, no, she'll do it. I'm like, no,
Ooh.
she's busy. And you know what he said to me? He
Hmm.
said, Tolu, make sure your father doesn't hear you speaking like that. I'm not lying. Make sure your father doesn't hear you speaking like that. What? You know? Anyway, which means I think what he was trying to say is that, helping her out with the baby
Hmm.
type thing. Anyway, one time I was at work, and he and I needed to meet up.
Yeah.
And now his wife had to now start working, because he was like a self-employed, quote unquote self-employed, right?
Okay.
And anyway, so he met up with me, uh, uh, during my lunch break or something, and he had the baby with him because obviously the wife is going to work.
Ooh,
And I
okay.
was like, okay. And anyway, so when we met, and he had the car seat in one hand, and sorry, one second, yeah, he had the car seat in one hand.
Mm-hmm.
1 second, please. I've got a very urgent call that's coming. I'm going to pause a second. Right. So we met up, and he had the car seat in one hand, right? And he said, "Oh, Tulu, please, before we begin our discussion, I need to change the baby's nappy."
Oh,
And I thought, hello, the irony of life. And then I looked at him. I didn't even need to say anything. So he looked at me with this from the corner of his eye, like, you know what,
don't even go there.
these things happen, And I
But
think the moral of the story is,
yeah.
at the end of the day, culture can give us some do's and don'ts, roles and
Mm-hmm.
responsibilities, but the reality is, in marriage, it's a partnership,
Yeah.
and the more we prepare, to embrace that ideal that marriage isn't, the wife has to do XYZ and the husband will do, but as a partnership where we're
Mm-hmm.
supporting each other, we are helping each other out, and there's no shame in that game. If, as a matter of fact, that is the demonstration of love. So I think at
Yeah.
the end, life has a way of equalizing everything. So that was the story I wanted to
But
share with you.
if I may ask, just for
Hmm.
the benefit of our listeners, because
Hmm.
you just never know what little nugget might help.
Hmm.
Did you ever ask him what brought about the change of mind or change in attitude?
Oh yes, absolutely,
What did
absolutely.
he say?
So
Because that might actually be a key thing
what
for people who are struggling with the same scenario where one spouse is setting what a woman should do and what a man should do,
hmm.
and then to have transformed. Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, I guess he learned a bit in the the hard way, right? Because he was self-employed, and
Mm,
she was like a stay-at-home mom. You understand? Well,
okay.
he asked her to stay at home type thing, right? Now
Okay.
his work wasn't moving as he would
Okay.
have liked it to move, right? So she thought, look, I'm gonna go to work, okay? And it got to that point, and so he didn't have a choice but to allow her go to work. So because she went to work,
Okay.
he had to, and then of course, he had to now look after the baby. So life,
So it was a cost saving
it
thing.
was a cost saving thing, and life has a way, like I say, of making you do what you need to do. You understand? And I really believe
Yeah.
it was that. So, he just kind
But
of
I
like,
think I
mhm,
think the moral of the story is really
yeah.
that we need to remember that whatever our backgrounds are, whatever um, ideologies we kind of grew up with in
Mm-hmm,
terms of what we saw in our
mm-hmm,
parents or whatever relationships around us,
mm-hmm.
each couple has to figure out what works for them. I think we mentioned this
Absolutely.
before in one of our
Yes.
earlier recordings that
Mm,
the two people in this relationship have come from four different people in their backgrounds.
mm-hmm,
Each person has their parents, and what you've seen in each of your sets of parents could either make or break your relationship.
mm-hmm,
So the
mm-hmm,
idea is for you to pick what you think works for you and filter out as noise whatever
mm,
doesn't, because sometimes we carry the liabilities of what we saw in our parents' relationships.
mm-hmm,
And they become a burden onto us, even though we had nothing to do. You're now in a relationship with a totally different person.
mm-hmm,
But because of what you've seen and what you grew up with to see as the norm, there was never any compromise in the relationship that you grew up in your home.
mm,
So you coming into a new one, compromise is like a taboo. No, it's no, this is how it's done.
mm,
So
mm.
what we're just nudging people to bear in mind is as you embark in your journey, compromise is a very, very key word in your relationship. And, Tulu
Absolutely.
will testify to that. There were compromises made, I'm sure, in his relationship
Mm,
as were in mine.
mm, mm,
Because if I came, I was just to give an indication, I was a very I could be very strong headed if I wanted to be. And I just felt like I thought very highly of myself. I wasn't arrogant, but I thought I was a gem. So whoever was going to marry me must really treat me like one. So I
Mm.
felt like I was a little princess that. But when I got married, I realized that my princessy lifestyle, I needed to bring it a few notches to realize the fact that now this is not your dad you're married to, because your dad will daddy's little girl kind of, oh, dad, I want this, like, you got it. This is not your husband.
So are you saying you were a diva?
Not diva, but
No, no,
at the
no, no.
same,
I was
but the
just
thing, no. It's a fair question. It's a fair question. In
yeah.
some context, I could be categorized as that, because I remember one of the initial things I had to break, well, my
Mm.
husband drew my attention to, was the fact that if he spoke to me in a certain way, or he said he didn't like something I did, I said, oh, even my dad will not say you didn't like that. I was
Mm.
like,
Mm. Mm.
oh my goodness. And he'll tell me, oh, well, I'm not your dad, I'm your husband, and
Mm.
this is not, however you. So those are the kind of diva-ness, so to speak, that I
Okay.
brought into my relationship, because I was daddy's little girl, and daddy always pampered. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so if my husband was telling me, oh, I don't like you doing this, I was like, no, even my dad wouldn't talk to me like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to pray, and the Holy Spirit nudged me. You better start listening, because that is the relationship you're in now. So
Yes,
if he's telling you he doesn't like something, you need to be humble enough to accept it. It
absolutely.
took me a while. It took a bit long, because for you to grown up, having spent about 20, how old was I? 24, 25 when I got married, being, allowed to just literally do whatever it was, because everybody just saw you as an angel. And then to now come into a relationship where someone with a different mindset now tells you, oh, that doesn't work for me.
Mm, mm, mm.
It takes a lot of humility to start saying, okay, I need to reprogram something. Not like, oh, well, you saw me like that before you married me, so if you don't like it, that's your problem. Like,
Yeah.
really? So yeah.
And just to go back to what you were saying earlier on about breaking or challenging the status quo,
Hmm.
um, as we've said it a few times, we're Christians, we believe in, we're people of faith, we believe in Jesus Christ, and
Hmm.
our main tenet is love God with all your heart, and then love your
Mm-hmm.
neighbor as yourself.
Itself, yeah.
I think even that at that fundamental level alone, um, it should, uh, and it isn't always apparent, and we're
Hmm.
all short. No one of us is, we're all work in progress, but even at that fundamental level, it should be almost what I'm looking for. It should be, no brainer to say, you
Hmm.
know what, I'm going to help my wife because I love her, because she's a child of God, and I love her very much. I love my child very much. This is a privilege to have a child. So being of service. Because love is not just a word. It's not a word
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's an
It's an
action thing.
action
It is
thing,
an
yeah.
action thing. So serving, one another is an act of love, isn't it? Because it's like,
But can I say something that
yeah.
might put a spin on what you just said?
Hmm.
Because I have seen people
Hmm.
who are always offering services
Hmm.
to people outside of their relationship, but they just cannot deal with that with their spouses.
Okay, so
That
that's,
worries me.
well, so
Because I think the
mhm,
negative thing about marriage is,
mm,
like, they grew up with this roles and responsibilities kind of contractual agreement you're going into when you're marrying someone. It's a contract. So you as the man, you do this. You as the woman, you do this. But let them go to their offices. They're running after their female colleagues to make sure they're comfortable. They're running after their male colleagues to make sure they're comfortable. Their bosses are like pampered. They go into church. Their pastors are pampered. But they come home. They cannot translate that into their relationship.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there is
And
some of that, but I think also the question is, some people, do they feel that they need more validation from people outside, and so that's why they do that outside and not at home, because love, Bible says charity begins at home. The love should begin at home, but some people do not do that because maybe they just take home for granted, and I
yeah, and
think
these are
it's
the kind of things that people need to examine,
absolutely,
because you
absolutely,
just take things like that for
you
granted, and
shouldn't,
people are saying,
exactly,
oh, the all who I know at work is so, she's so humble, she's so
exactly.
giving. And my husband is saying, you need to live with her,
Mm,
just come and spend a day with her, and you see a different side to her.
you
And
know
we need to be careful that that is not the kind of mixed signals that we're exhuming. Because at the end of the day, God expects consistency from us.
And
It's not.
sorry, just to add again, I mean, obviously, am a minister myself,
Mm,
of some sorts, and I know many ministers have that issue where in church they are one
yes.
person, and at
Mm-hmm.
home the stories you hear is that
Mm-hmm.
there isn't that correlation
Mm-hmm.
translation of
Consistency.
love exactly, and then you find out that the kids or the families, especially because listen, kids cannot be fooled, right? So you now see the kids like really rebelling to say, well, you say one thing in church and then at
Mm,
home you're a different person.
yeah.
What's up with that? And I think it's very similar to the scenario you
Mm-hmm.
painted,
Yes.
where people are taken for granted because, oh yes, my family at home, I'm just going to try and put that public persona,
Mm.
out there, and at home I'm a different person, and it's really very unhealthy.
And I think, tying that back to the stage of the relationship that we're talking about, the
Yeah,
discovery,
yeah.
these are the kind of things that we need to look out for in each
Mm-hmm.
other. Because when you're
Absolutely.
courting and you're seeing a different personality, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm very old school. So that word courtship, courting, is going to
We'll
be
go for
coming
it.
back.
We
It's
go
going to
for
be
it.
coming back and coming out all the time. When you start noticing all these telltale signs, don't overlook them. Say, oh, he just likes to be funny. Oh, he's a very, very funny person when we're outside. But when he's home, he's very serious. Oh, she's just very, very, so what's the word now? Humble when we're
Mm,
outside. Oh, she'll make sure everybody's comfortable. And then when it's just you and her, she's hostile. She wouldn't even look at you or give you the time of the day. We need to start looking and paying attention to those telltale signs, because if they're like that when you're courting, trust me, when you're comfortable in marriage and you put a ring on it, it's not going to go any easier, because
mm,
then
mm,
both of you are comfortable. There's no reason to impress each other anymore. So these are the reasons we're talking about this telltale signs, because we've had people who are struggling with some of these issues that they got into marriage and they started complaining about all this, and you're thinking, surely your personalities just didn't change when you got married.
mm,
These things must have been there, but you chose not to pay attention. So please, let's not just use that discovery stage. I think I said it in the last episode, as just a date night thing and looking good and looking firm and hot and whatever, every other terminology that they use these days. It's not just about the physical or the attraction. It's much deeper than that. So please, let's use
absolutely.
the phase of the relationship to really dig deep and figure out who really we are getting into bed with. Literally
Mm,
the
mm,
whatever other thing they want to use there.
yeah,
Who
yeah,
you're,
absolutely.
So please don't ignore any telltale signs that tell you about someone's underlying personality that you think, oh, it's just, no, they're just very funny. Oh, they're just silly when they're outside. No, if they're silly outside and they're very, very uptight when they're home, there's a problem.
Mm, 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 mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm. Excellent. So, so with everything that we're saying, I think the underlying, I think the thread that goes right across is, two lives coming, two different backgrounds, two different, potentially, I mean, even if you live on the same street, right,
Well,
the chances of having the same exact sets of value system and belief system and tradition and culture is very, very slim, so
let's even break it down further.
yeah.
Siblings don't even have the same value
Exactly,
system.
exactly. So it's so important for us to then explore what these things are. The prevalent ones in our lives, and
Hmm.
get it sorted out. Fantastic. Mm,
And I think also
yep.
it also ties back to communication, because it's one thing to spot all these things and to feel intimidated, broaching those conversations to
Yeah.
say, I'm observing this, or because you have to find a way to communicate also.
Yeah.
And I think I learned something recently from my children, which is very insightful. The love language.
Hmm.
Each person has theirs.
Yeah.
I Do you know, I had prior to that, before I read up, I think there are about five or so, or seven.
Yeah,
I
five
don't
love
remember now.
languages. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm,
So I just had an overarching thing. And every time I told them, I said, Mom, no, you need to break it down. We need to know what that means. So
mm,
they gave me a link to go and read up on the different words. So the three of us sat down because they're grown now. We actually stepped through those five and we identified which ones we wanted. And having said that, it's actually helped us in our relation because the kind of things I just did as that's me.
mm,
They wanted you to give it a to commentary title because that's how their brain or their minds have been programmed. But the lesson I wanted to bring out of that is you need to understand what works for you in
yeah.
that relationship. If your partner is a touchy feely or whatever, I've forgotten what the categories are now. The
Yeah.
love
So
service,
there's
the love uh-huh.
service gifts, affirmation, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And there's two others.
So
Yeah.
please do your research. Wherever you need to figure it out, you need to understand, what really makes your partner feel like they're on top of the world when they're
Mm,
with you, because that's really what it's about. You want somebody who celebrates you. You want somebody who is your greatest cheerleader. You don't want someone who makes you feel like you're less than a person when you're with them. And that is what love is about. They bring out the best in you. So you then need to put that effort. Both sides need to put in the effort to understand, what do I do to make this person the best that they can be when they're around me.
mm.
And once you start learning that during your courtship phase, it becomes a natural progression when you eventually get married, because then you don't have to reinvent any wheels because you're used to it. So
Absolutely.
please invest in your relationships. Don't just read up books or just go and listen to everybody else talk about what a good relationship should be without you putting in your own time to actually speak to you. Because I'm not talking about just reading books. You need to speak to each other
Mm, mm, mm.
and understand what works for both of you in that relationship. Because what works for me in my marriage will not be what works for Tolu in his marriage. Even though we all have, both have the five, we have the knowledge of the five. I need to know. So that's without going on about the same thing. Please do that and be open. We've said it so many times. Be honest and be open to talk about
Yeah.
these things because they really matter. Please.
Let me go back to the story that we started and just buttress that point that you made. You understand? Because you did ask the question that what created the shift. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Aha. And I think what something a little bit unfortunate happened because he then became quite resentful, you know,
Oh.
because she was now earning, she was now
Mm-hmm.
the breadwinner. He was at home with the kids. It was a bit. They had another child eventually,
Oh, okay.
and he just wouldn't. He just wrestled really badly with himself because
Oh.
um, even though he and I would challenge his thinking, that look, this is your wife. You're not, there's no competition here. I remember I
Mm-hmm.
always used to say to him, there's no competition here. It's you,
Oh.
you are one unit. So why would you feel that way? Be grateful
Oh.
that, she's actually, while she's doing, the work, you're looking after the kids. This is
Mm-hmm.
the phase. This is one phase. There's a next phase, look forward to
Exactly.
the next phase. But he felt very bitter about the situation and
Oh
eventually,
dear.
the marriage didn't work out. So I think
Oh
to
no.
buttress your point, and this is why we're doing this talks, really, isn't it? To
Oh.
buttress your point, I think, in it, looking back, I think the ideal situation would be, sit down with his wife and say, look, I know this thing didn't start right. I was, obviously looking at you to being home, and then I would do the thing. But now the,
Mm.
the, the tables are turned. Um, Even if he says, help me process this,
Mm-hmm.
this is how I feel. I'm just buttressing your point about open and honest
Yeah.
communication, being
Yeah.
vulnerable. And I
Yeah.
think some men are too scared to be vulnerable, um, with their spouses, and I think if it was vulnerable, because I know them quite well. I know that
Mm.
she's a good listener. She was really
Okay.
insightful, intelligent. She would bring some light to, like, look,
Mm-hmm.
she could even say something like, I don't see, in fact, not only do I not see you as less of a man because you're at home, in fact, I see you more of a man now that you're supporting the family.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what I mean? She could have said something like that. you know,
And
but I don't think he gave her the opportunity
mhm,
to do that.
to
Yeah,
walk that road with her.
exactly.
And I think the other misconception is that until you're bringing in some financial contribution from our cultural buyers, have been raised to believe that if you're not bringing in money, then you're less of a man. And that is so
Absolutely.
wrong. Because at the end of the day, the home is not just about money. You just talked about their children. Can you imagine the quality of life that he would have given the children by being there with them, seeing them grow, and just having that bond with them? Those money
Absolutely.
cannot buy. I'm sure
Mm,
the wife
mm,
would probably be feeling like she was missing out on those really precious moments while she
mm,
was at
mm,
work.
mm, mm, mm.
So we need to, and that's why we need to try and analyze all of this in totality as a, in the holistic way. That relationships, a home, is not just about money. Somebody
Absolutely.
has to make sure it's running well. Somebody has to make sure the kids are looked after. I
Mm.
mean, if he actually wanted to translate it to monetary terms, the money they would have been spending on childcare for those two
Absolutely.
children
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and everything else
Absolutely.
I get to do during the school run up, aside from childcare and everything else that it does, having maybe needing a cleaner when, instead of whilst his own helping with cleaning the house or whatever, if you wanted to add value and didn't feel like he had to bring in physical money, he could really have made himself feel good about the fact that I'm really the one spending time with our children.
And guess
And
what?
you may, yeah,
I was just going to say, and while you're doing that, you're showing your boys an example,
thank you.
you know?
So that's an education that the
Mm,
current generation also they need to, kind of run with. That anybody can do. That's why it's a partnership.
absolutely.
There are no do's and don'ts. Because one of the other things that I also realized that from my personal life and from what I've heard from other people is this notion of, going to the kitchen. That's
Mm.
another issue. And thankfully, when we were younger in marriage, our principle was, or our agreement, basically, I don't even think we ever spoke about, is whoever got home first did the cooking for dinner.
Well,
We were both
that's a new
working.
one for me. That's a new one, but that
We
sounds
were
really
both
interesting.
working. We
Yeah,
were
of
both
course,
working for our
of course,
future. We
of
had
course.
children. So did it matter really? When he was single, he cooked for himself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So weekends, I'll do anything that I felt might probably throw him off, maybe make all the big whatever, and
mm-hmm.
then weekdays, if you had to boil rice or boil pasta or make whatever you
Absolutely.
wanted. Because if I was running late, it would put me
Mm,
under so much pressure and I'll be
absolutely.
irritated if I got home and I met him there and he was just resting and then I had to hit the kitchen despite the fact that we've both been at work. That is not, I don't see that as love. And because it's between the two of you, like people say, well, nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors. You might have friends who say, I will never do that for my wife. I will never do that for my husband. Trust me, a lot of those people do much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
please, let's not feel too proud to be vulnerable with our partners.
Yes.
Nobody needs to know how your home runs. Nobody needs to know the secret to how your home functions. It's between the two of you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And by being such a wonderful partnership, you're setting a great precedence for your children. They can only
Absolutely.
learn from what they see, not what you tell them. So if they see daddy, not feeling too arrogant or too proud to get the vacuum cleaner whenever, or get into the kitchen, and mom can do the DIY, because I know couples who, whose husbands cannot do DIY, so wives who do the DIY.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But the husbands are fantastic cooks. So will I say because I was raised, the men are supposed to be, using the hammer and the women are supposed to be in the kitchen? That home will not function to its optimal
Absolutely.
abilities.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
please, that's why this discovery process is there. You need to figure out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, so you embrace and embellish what's already there.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if there's anything to take away from what we said, really, it's just re-emphasizing the fact that you need to work together. Don't go in with the do's and don'ts. A man does this, a woman doesn't do that. A woman does this, a man doesn't do that. Whoever gets there first does it. That was really the principle in my home when we were younger, and it still
Mm.
is now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever gets where and things need to be done. My husband will wake me up Saturday morning. Oh, grocery shopping. Where are we going to? You out there? Oh, dear. Okay. Let me get my thoughts together. We used to do bulk
Absolutely.
shopping then when we were younger, just to make sure he will wake up Saturday. Oh, because he knew I didn't like driving, and he enjoyed being. He's an outdoorsy person, so that was his strength. He didn't say, "Oh well, you better make sure you go and drive and get to the market." He would go to all these fish markets and go and buy all this stuff
Mm-hmm.
and get everything home. He didn't. He enjoyed doing it because it was for our home. And whilst he was out there, I would do what needed to be done around the house. And then both of us would get back together later in the day and we could rest together because we had kind of divided the chores amongst each other, make the most of each other's strengths. And then we could rest and relax together. So please try and take this as it's not a thing of a competition that, it's very unwomanly for me to do this or unmanly for me. My
Mm-hmm.
friends must not hear I'm doing this for my wife. Really? Do you know what your friends really do for theirs? So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, for me, it's everything you said, plus just to remember that, we are one unit at the end of the day, isn't it? So
mm-hmm,
when we are not being helpful, we're not serving one another, we're only hurting ourselves as a unit, isn't it? So
exactly.
everything we do, we're doing it for the one unit.
Yes.
Um, and secondly, just to wrap up from me before we go, well, um, we've already said that we're Bible believing Christians, and we I think that's part of what drew us to starting this podcast. And I believe that
Yeah.
at some stage, we will um, be open to creating a small group where we can have some of these discussions and look, critically and very, very objectively at what the Bible teaches, because we believe
Yes.
that God is the author and the architect of marriage. And so he's given
Mm-hmm.
us everything we need in the word, in his word, to have successful relationships. But I think sometimes there's misinterpretation because of the people
Yes.
that maybe we trust to interpret some of the word for us. So so this is another area that we're exploring. That
Yeah.
we will critically, with no bias, look at some of the tenets of marriage in the Bible. To just
Yeah.
give us that strength as we go through. So before I ask Olu for parting goodbye statement, I just want to say please remember to share. Um, if you've listened and had found this recording useful, share it, like it, post your questions. We will respond. And so look out for other opportunities that will come out from our decrypting relationship talks, and maybe master classes, webinars, things like that. Just look out for them, and
They're all a work in
they're all
progress.
a
We'll
work in
see.
progress.
We'll
That's
see
gonna
where we're taken. But the idea
exactly,
is to serve and to just be a blessing to the community and just
absolutely,
hopefully from our experiences be able to educate and based on the lessons that we've learned. Some of them have not been easy. I have to emphasize that because
absolutely,
it's
absolutely.
your flesh wrestling, with the Spirit of God when God is correcting you and telling you you need to do something and you think, oh no, no, that can't be fair. So we all wrestled with all of that.
I
That
had
is
to repent last night. I had to say to Lord, I'm so sorry. How could I have done that to my wife? How could I have
exactly.
had that attitude to her? I'm so, I just started like, how? I was
But it
so
takes it takes
surprised.
some level of maturity from your walk with God, from you being humble enough to hear what God is telling you for you to even get to that.
Yes,
Because
yes.
some
And
people don't apologize at all. It's not
mm,
even negotiable.
mm,
Nothing. There's no such thing in their vocabulary. They don't say I'm sorry. And those are the kind of things that we will still be breaking down and to let people know that, this is the journey for the long haul. The idea is for us to continue to be a blessing. And if we have been, please do let us know. And then do give us your feedback in terms of comments. And there are things that you want us to touch on. We look forward to hearing on those so that we can, even if we don't have the experience, we are looking to expand this platform whereby
yes,
people can be brought on to educate us further because we don't know it all. We do not know it all and we've never claimed to. So please, just share and continue to be blessed. Thank you for listening.
yes. Thank you so much for listening. And from myself is goodbye, and Olu.
Arrivederci again. I'm
Yes,
going
yes.
Italian these days.
Adios.
Maybe I'm missing Italy.
Why not? Why not?
Okay, guys. Thank you. Bye
Goodbye from
bye.
us. Bye bye.